we'd like to know more about the proposal of Greenpeace, no, to declare a national climate emergency. Kasi-declare po lang ngayon ng Luzon-wide state of emergency. Ano po ba yung ibig sabihin ng national climate emergency? What does it entail? Ano po yung mga gusto niyo mangyari under that situation?
So, ang hinihingi namin sa gobyerno ngayon ay mag-declare sila ng isang climate emergency declaration. We think this is very urgent. A climate emergency declaration is actually, it declares the climate crisis as the foremost national priority and puts a climate lens sa lahat ng policy and decision-making and implementation ng isang bansa. So around the world, may several countries na nag-declare ng climate emergency declaration. At dito mismo sa Pilipinas, meron tayong at least 3 provinces, yung councils ng provinces na yun, at ng municipalities, na nag-declare na gaya ng sa Bacolod, sa Tolosa, sa Leyte, tsaka sa Cebu. So ang hinihingi namin ay kailangan maging top priority, kailangan maging policy of the state, yung foremost na policy ng state, ang pag-address ng climate crisis. At tingin namin ay isang mekanismo kung paano ito magyayari ay ang pag-declare ng Pilipinas ng climate emergency.
Ma'am, you mentioned the 3 countries kanyo who's tried this paradigm and this approach. What does it entail in those 3 countries at least? I mean, what did declaring this emergency climate situation, what did it entail? What actions did it lead to?
So dito sa Philippines, we have 3 jurisdictions, so Bacolod, Tolosa, and Cebu City Councils that have declared a national climate emergency. So part of what they've committed to is to put climate action at the center of yung policy making nila as a city or as a municipality. In other countries, for example, that have declared climate emergency, for example, Bangladesh was one of the first to have declared a climate emergency declaration. They called it a planetary emergency declaration. It's the same kind of spirit na gawing priority ng isang bansa, ng isang gobyerno, ang pag gumagawa ng mga polisiya, pag nag-i-implement ng mga projects, pag gumagawa ng plans, etc., nilalagay nila ang parang may climate lens parate yung kanilang perspective. So for example, sa atin, ano ibig sabihin ng putting climate action as a central policy of the state? For example, right now, 'di ba, meron tayong COVID pandemic. And there has been a lot of effort from the government to look at COVID recovery. But the COVID recovery plans that we have right now, did it build in climate action into the COVID recovery plans? What we're asking for, a lot of environmental groups are asking, is that when the government plans yung COVID recovery natin, economic recovery, tsaka yung recovery ng mga after the pandemic, we want to see climate actions like yung energy transition, yung iplano na mag-phase out na ng coal, bring in more renewable energy, etc. into that recovery. Kasi it's also yung long-term ang tinitingnan natin in terms of addressing both the COVID and the climate crisis. So basically, that's what it means. It means putting in that climate lens, putting in climate action as the number 1 priority ng isang bansa. And we think that sa Pilipinas, napaka-importante nun kasi, di ba, isa nga tayo sa mga pinaka nasasalanta ng climate emergency.
I'm trying to imagine po how this can be operationalized after declaration of a national climate emergency. How this can be operationalized so that it's not just lip service on the part of government. Kasi relatively madaling mag-declare ng ganyan ng gobyerno, pero and then it falls back to so what happens next? Di ba? Baka mamaya magkasundo lahat na, oh yeah, it's an emergency, tapos nagkalimutan na rin. So
Oh,
what
yeah.
would you need? Would laws be needed here? What else would be needed here to make sure that it does push forward?
Uh-huh. It's a combination of a lot of things. So when siguro look at it as a strategy, as a coherent strategy that pulls everything together from the lens of climate and climate justice. So sa amin, for Greenpeace, what a climate emergency declaration means to us is that when the government declares a climate emergency, it must also hold those most responsible for the climate crisis accountable. So sino itong mga responsible? Yung sinabi nga, nasabi na rin to ni Duterte sa isang speech niya, yung industrialized nations who are most responsible must be held accountable. For us, it's also fossil fuel companies. So we feel that the government must hold these companies and these countries accountable for the climate crisis. Tapos it should enjoin a whole of government and whole of society approach to strengthen yung climate response. So it doesn't only mean, for example, ngayon, diba, tinitingnan natin yung Department of Disaster Resilience. Gusto magtayo ng gobyerno ng ganon. Nagbubuo sila ng task force for disaster resilience. So operationally, what would a climate emergency declaration mean to that sort of establishing a disaster resilience department, etc.? For us, what it means is that when we look at crises, lalo na yung mga climate-related crises, dapat we look not just on the response, not just on yung disasters, kasi yung focus niya disaster lang eh, 'di ba? So mag-focus dapat siya sa mga policies that strengthen yung building resilience to future crises, including the climate crisis. So, for example, what are these policies? So it means strengthening environmental regulations and environmental laws. That should be part of a climate strategy of a country. For example, yung diba, yung nakikita natin ng mga baha ngayon sa Cagayan, naging cause yan, logging, erosion ng mga mountainsides, etc. Strengthening yung mga biodiversity laws, for example, protecting our oceans, which will be most impacted also by warming when that happens, and it protects livelihoods.